Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's selection comes out as from Liam. You've done a song by Koinji, so you may recognize that this has a bit in common with that band, same drummer composer, and it also falls in the zeuhl ballpark, but Ruins is a rawer, more aggressive version with just bass guitar, drums, and glossolalia vocals for most of their releases. I'm a very big fan of this band, and this was the first song of theirs I heard a little over 10 years when I first looked them up. Cheers. Alright, so that's what we're checking out today. The band is Ruins, the song is Skhanddraviza. I know we've checked out a couple of bands or songs that would fit into the zeuhl genre or style, but honestly, it's something that we check out so rarely. I don't have anything that I think I've picked up pattern-wise that I could attribute to the style. So let's just dive into this and go in with a little bit of an uneducated reaction and see what Ruins is bringing to the table today. Ooh. Okay. Dude, they can get... I was gonna say they can get groovy, but then something like this happens. So it's a small tempo reduction. Oh, back to the verse. Second time through this section, still not making any more sense to me. Yeah, the panning on that guitar is interesting. So a bridge. Just a random crossfade in a song? Okay. Yeah, bring it back to groove. Of course, they couldn't let that ending just be traditional. Now, could they? They had to spice it up a little bit. Now, I want to check this comment real quick. Just bass guitar, drums, and vocals. I wonder if there's supposed to be a comma there. Just bass, guitar, drums, and vocals. Because I went in expecting just bass and drums. And we did get just that for a while, but there's certainly another instrument that comes in there. And it could be a second tracked bass that also has a pitch modifier on it. Because honestly, with all the distortion on that very fuzzy lead guitar sound that we had on some of the sections, the bass timbre is so far divorced from it. It could really be just about anything that's been modified into this really fuzzy, distorted buzzsaw kind of sounds. I mean, you can do this with a keyboard. You could probably get the similar sound with synthesizers. I mean, it could be any instrument. So it could be a bass guitar. But that would also require the backing track for live, because there's certainly two instruments being played there, regardless of what the second one is. And I was sort of expecting it to stick with just the bass and drums that we saw at the beginning of the track. So that was kind of surprising. Like I said, I wonder if there's supposed to be a comma in the comment. Maybe I'll look that up later and get some definitive answers to the personnel list, and that way we can get some clarity on what that other instrument is. What is this song doing? I chuckled there at the end. It was a nice belly laugh because something dawned on me during that faster part. It was like pure eighth notes. The bass had this nice moving fluidity to it, and the drums were sort of all over the place, providing different accent points. Still within the eighth note idea though, and that's when things clicked. I was like, wait a second, the bass and the drum, they're playing the same thing. In fact, the drum is trying to utilize the different pitched parts of the drum. Maybe the 3 or 4 toms they have that are all tuned to different notes. Maybe the snare. And all the different parts of the drum do have pitches to them. And so the drummer is trying to play along with the same up and down movements that the bassist is doing. They accent the same time the bass is. That's when it kind of clicked with me. Even going back to the beginning of the song, the drum and the bass are so intertwined. Very rarely is the drummer providing a strong sense of traditional rhythmic pattern. It typically is something a bit more concerned with fluidity and even melody writing a bit more than drums typically do. But it's always in a way to mimic at least a portion, but sometimes all of what the bass is doing. They're so interlinked on this track, and I find that phenomenal because the bass, we hear the bass doing rhythmic things all the time, whether it's jazz or rock or metal, especially metal, especially more rhythmic sides of progressive metal. The bass just doing rhythmic things is something it does often, but melodic drumming is something that doesn't happen often. And so it's very cool to find a song like this where not only is the drummer doing melodic drumming, but it's doing it as a sort of duet with the bass, as if the drummer wants to do harmony with it in a way. And I find that to be really spectacular. Like when you have two different pets, maybe a cat and a dog, and one of them tries to speak like the other. Maybe the cat starts barking or something like that. And it's just really cute that they want to sort of be included like that. And that's how I view the drum work in here. Like it wants to be a harmony to the bass, but it's a percussion instrument and it's doing its best to emulate what the bass is doing. But it pulls it off so well too that I can't help but smile. It works really well. And I love the ingenuity that goes into that. Sometimes what they do together just doesn't make any sense, not rhythmically, not melodically, not harmonically, it's just kind of, at least to me, seemingly random. It obviously isn't. Many of these sections are repeated. There is a pattern to it all. But especially on a first time through some of these sections, it just feels random. Now, after the verse, I think, I don't know, structure is kind of flaky in here. We enter into something that's super groovy, and this comes from the bass and the drums splitting, emphasizing different parts, creating syncopated accent points, which gives us this sense of groove through this section. These guys can make a groove. And just a little aside, I think it's very cool that in that final section, the bass and the drum give us the eighth note idea, and it's actually a vocal that comes in and gives us uh, the consistency of the tempo, like a metronome, to create the syncopation against the not accented downbeats that the bass and the drum are giving us, creating the groove. And the groove comes from the vocal inclusion. I thought that was very cool. Just while we're on the topic of groove, I wanted to bring that up. But yeah, this band can get groovy, man. Just super awesome. You just listen to it, a little bit of stank face, and you gotta get into it with it. It's just too good not to move your body. But they always find a way to spice it up. Um, I'm not really sure how to interpret the vocal work in here. It's chaotic, it's all over the place, and there's also a ton of, what was that style of vocal that Liam had mentioned? Glossolalia. I've never heard that word before. The thing with the vocals is that it's almost like they're introducing a consistent warble. And I want to use that word specifically because honestly, the difference between like a warbly sound and vibrato isn't really that different. You're taking a sound and making it flatter and sharper. You're creating this wobbliness to it. But there's something distinct about the execution here that it doesn't feel like vibrato. And I don't know if it's the width of it. However, I mean, we've listened to especially some operatic vocalists on this channel that have very wide vibratos, and I wouldn't call them warbly either. Maybe it's the quickness of movement. Maybe it's the fact that, oh, you know what it might be? Vibrato is typically used only when you hold out a note in order to give it some character so it's not just a flat tone being held out for a long time. Rock, metal, a lot of popular styles of music will just hit the note and hold it. There's not a lot of vibrato at the end of it, and some people might feel that that sounds flat or boring. The vibrato is there to add spice to long notes. These people just constant, whether they're just starting with a note or not, everything just has this shakiness to it. Like the vocal cords absolutely do not want to work at all, and nothing comes off as stable. And everybody's doing it, and it just creates this pitch chaos. There's so many pitches being presented at any one time, especially once we have the two and the three vocalists all doing this vibrato-y stuff. And it is just, it's wild. And then you add in the fact that some of the vocal ideas have these massive leaps in them. We'll shift from chest to head voice without having that mix in the middle for a smoother transition. It's just, the vocal melodies are wild to begin with, and then we put in the fluctuation of constantly making the notes flatter and sharper, bringing in all this microtonal elements to it, and it's aharmonic in a lot of ways, despite the fact that they are hitting these pitches initially before bouncing around them, sort of giving the illusion that they're within a specific key or sound, but the effect of it is that it's everything. It's all this sound at once. The three vocals rarely do anything cohesive. They're all off in their own worlds, their own rhythms, their own melodies. Some of the rhythms that they are using are barely coherent within the rhythms that we have in the song. At that one point, we hit the groove, and I'm like, man, they can get groovy sometimes, and then they do this, and this is basically add in all of these vocal lines that obscure the groove through their odd timings and rhythmic phrasings. It's bonkers. It's just sonic overload, really, but not in a way that like noise rock does, not in a way that you would hear from post metal or anything like that. It's not about the largeness of the sound. It's just about all of the information coming in. There's honestly, if we strip the vibrato from the vocals, it's honestly not a lot of overload. It's easily written down on sheet music, and while it might be a little obtuse, it isn't actually a lot. But when you put in all of those microtonal things, the constant shifting of notes from three, half the instruments, sometimes more than half the instruments when that guitar isn't present, it creates a lot of melodic information that ends up feeling like overload, especially when you bring in the rhythmic element to all of this. How we have the syncopation from our rhythm section, but also the odd rhythmic ideas from our melodies. And that about wraps up my experience with this, my explanation of it. That covers the verse and the chorus. The bridge was sort of more of that. I do like that we had a little bit of a variation on it, and that variation took us to our outro section, which was brand new. I think the structure here would be A, B, A, B, C, D, which is pretty cool. A nice variation on the typical idea. You hit us with that verse-chorus combo, you throw a bridge in. I'm expecting a return back to the chorus or back to a verse-chorus, and instead you give us a brand new outro. I like that. But a lot of it is still based off of the same ideas that I picked up earlier in the track. That's not to diminish it at all. I just don't have anything that I think is new to say about the final two sections that isn't just repeating what, and I've already brought up describing what happened in the verse and the chorus. I will say though, the ending is kind of bonkers. I really thought they were going to end it in a more traditional fashion. Silly me for thinking that. And they go out of their way at the last minute, like 3 seconds to go, 4 seconds to go, just to make it fun, just to change it up and undercut my expectations one final time. At the last second, they set me up for that, and then pull the rug out regardless. They were the one who put there like, look, step aside, please. Let us put a rug here. I'm like, oh, that's nice. It's nicer on my feet. This is great. And then they pulled it out. Like I should have seen it coming. That's what the ending felt like to me. Very well executed. I didn't even notice it. This just hijacked my brain. And for whatever reason, for a second, I was like, oh, they're going for a traditional ending. That makes perfect sense, when obviously it doesn't. There's nothing in this is traditional. There's no reason I should have thought that. They just tricked me. And I have to give them props for it because it was a very well done trick. I'm going to look up some lyrics here, look up personnel, and we'll go from there. All right. On the topic of personnel, there are only two people. And that is indeed our drummer and vocalist, Tatsuya Yoshida, the only current member. They were there for everything from the beginning, and a bassist who also does backup vocals. And this bass slot has been in rotation. There's been 4 basses so far. It looks like the one for this album is Hisashi Sasaki. So yeah, that second instrument is probably a second tracked bass with some effects on it. It makes me wonder how they do it live, if they do it live. Primarily because there's 3 vocal sounds and 2 bass sounds, and there's only 2 people here. So maybe they don't play live at all, which I suppose is always an option. But yeah, that clears some of that up. There are no lyrics, though, that I could find. And then it dawned on me, zeuhl? I don't know how you pronounce that. Um, One of the first bands I remember doing zeuhl style, and it might have even been before it had a proper name like this, before it had this classification, was Magma. And Magma doesn't use a real language. I don't remember if they made it up and like its actual rules to it, or if it's just sounds they make up and they have general patterns. I don't remember how far in depth the language goes, but it's quite possible that this band also isn't using real words. It is a Japanese band. It's possible they're using Japanese. I don't speak it. I don't understand it. So it's be my understanding of the lyrics in here, even if I could hear them properly, would be about as good as if it was in a made-up language. But I suppose that's always an option on this too, which would explain why there are no lyrics anywhere on the internet for this. However, the project also seems to be rather small as far as fandom goes. This song only has 25,000 plays, and it is the most played one on this album. So, yeah, they have 2,000 monthly listeners. The band might just be too small for most lyric websites. There's a lot of things that can go into play there, but they don't even put their own lyrics on their Bandcamp page. So I'm still kind of leaning a little bit more towards it's a made-up language to fit in the zeuhl tradition. Um, Yeah, it's just a wacky song. I didn't really bring up comparisons too much because I'm trying to get away from that. But I mean, certainly there is some little bit of Cardiacs, definitely some Mr. Bungle, System of a Down stuff, which System of a Down's just newer Mr. Bungle at times. I definitely hear some stuff in here that reminds me of other things, but again, I don't really want to go into that too much because I don't really think it adds much to conversation, at least from an analytical perspective. Also, I think what they're doing here is just wildly eclectic too. Maybe it's built off of some other stuff, but it's also possible they've never heard of Mr. Bungle. So even from sort of an evolutionary idea of sounds, it might not even be worthwhile to dive into. Anyways, that wraps up my thoughts on Ruins' Skhanddraviza. Skhanddraviza? I don't know where the emphasis is. Maybe there is no emphasis on this word. What are your thoughts, opinions, perspectives on it? Toss all that stuff down in the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree, which takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. Guess technically it wraps it up for the week, too. I'll be back tomorrow. 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC. We're going to check out a full album. Otherwise, Sunday morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the live stream. And Monday, we'll be back with next week's theme. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to. And have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.